The rain had fallen for 3 days straight over the red earth of Ngo Thi. The ground was soaked, the air heavy with the smell of wet clay and gunpowder. It was 1965, and deep beneath this muddy land, a girl was digging with her bare hands. Her name was Ngo Thi Tuyet. Before the world called her the ghost woman of Ngo Thi, Tuyet was just another girl in a small farming village not far from the Saigon River. Her family grew rice and cassava. Her hands were calloused from years of labor, her skin darkened by the southern sun. But Tuyet's eyes, sharp, steady, and calm, always carried something different, something unspoken. She was born in 1944 during the final years of French colonial rule in Vietnam. By the time she could walk, her country had already known decades of war. Her father, a quiet man who believed in independence, was taken away one night by colonial soldiers. He never returned. From that day forward, Tuyet learned to listen, not just to words, but to the earth itself. Every tremor, every vibration beneath her feet meant danger or survival. As the 1960s began, a new war came like a storm. The Americans arrived, first with advisors, then with bombers, then with everything they had. The peaceful fields of Ngo Thi turned into a battlefield. Helicopters hovered like metal dragons over the treetops. The ground shook with the impact of artillery. And yet, in that chaos, Tuyet found her purpose. At 17, she joined the local resistance, a small network of villagers who carried supplies, built tunnels, and passed messages. She wasn't trained to fight, but she was brave and small enough to crawl through spaces where grown men couldn't fit. When the others hesitated, Tuyet volunteered. She was the first to go down, the first to dig, the first to breathe the suffocating air beneath the ground. Those early tunnels were crude, just narrow holes barely wide enough for a single person. No lights, no air. The walls dripped with mud, the ceiling pressed so low she could feel the heartbeat of the earth against her back. And yet Tuyet never complained. She said to her comrades, "If the bombs fall from the sky, then we must live beneath it." Soon those tunnels became home, not just for Tuyet, but for hundreds of fighters, medics, and messengers. They built kitchens that hid their smoke under layers of bamboo and soil. They carved out hospitals, meeting rooms, even tiny sleeping chambers. Life continued, in whispers, in shadows, in darkness. At night, Tuyet would crawl to the surface to collect supplies from nearby villagers. The moonlight was her only cover. Sometimes she carried a wounded soldier on her back through flooded rice paddies, every step a gamble between life and discovery. When American searchlights swept the fields, she froze, covered in mud, unmoving, blending into the earth itself. And slowly the legend began. The villagers started calling her Ngo Tuyet Om, the silent Tuyet. They said she could disappear into the soil, that even the bombs could not find her. Among the fighters, she became a symbol of endurance, the girl who smiled even when the world was collapsing above her head. One night, as American helicopters roared overhead, Tuyet sat in the darkness of a half-finished tunnel. Beside her, a young soldier trembled, afraid that the tunnel would collapse. She placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "The earth will protect us if we respect it." Moments later, the bombs began to fall, deafening, relentless. The ground shook, dust rained from the ceiling, but the tunnel held. And when the echoes faded, Tuyet simply smiled and kept digging. By dawn, her hands were bleeding, her nails torn, her body shaking from exhaustion. Yet when her commander offered her rest, she refused. "If I stop now," she said, "someone else will have to take my place." That was how Tuyet lived, quietly, stubbornly, as though pain itself had no power over her. In 1965, after one brutal raid near Ben Duoc, Tuyet's team was nearly discovered. American patrols swept through the jungle with dogs, searching for tunnel entrances. Tuyet led her comrades to safety, guiding them through a hidden path under a termite mound. When everyone was safe, she stayed behind, erasing footprints, covering the entrance, waiting alone in the darkness while the soldiers passed just meters away. The dogs barked, the soldiers shouted, but Tuyet didn't move, not even to breathe. Hours later, she crawled back into the tunnel, covered in mud and sweat, her heart still pounding. When her comrades saw her alive, one of them laughed and said, "You're not human, Tuyet, you're a ghost." And the name stuck. From that day forward, they began to whisper through the tunnels, "The ghost woman of Cu Chi walks among us." No one could have known that this quiet, fearless girl would one day become one of the most legendary figures of the Vietnam War, a name that American soldiers feared and her own people revered. Beneath the soil of Cu Chi, a legend was being born, a girl who dug deeper than fear itself, a spirit who turned darkness into her weapon. Her name was Ngo Thi Tuyet, and soon the world above would learn to fear the world below. By 1966, the Cu Chi tunnels had become a living organism. They stretched for more than 200 kilometers, arteries of resistance winding beneath the earth. Every passage, every hidden trap door, every turn of dirt carried a story. And at the heart of it all was Tuyet. Her comrades said she never seemed to sleep. When others rested, Tuyet was already crawling through the narrow shafts, carrying messages, food, or ammunition. Sometimes she spent days underground, emerging only to breathe for a few minutes before vanishing again. Her hair was matted with clay, her hands always bleeding, but her eyes still burned with the same quiet fire. That year, the Americans began their full-scale operations to clear and destroy Cu Chi. They called it Operation Crimp, a campaign meant to wipe out the tunnels once and for all. Thousands of troops, flamethrowers, bulldozers, napalm. They were certain that no human could survive under that inferno, but Tuyet and her people did. As napalm rolled across the jungle, Tuyet guided entire groups through the labyrinth, moving silently in total darkness. When smoke filled the air vents, she covered them with wet leaves to cool the heat. When soldiers dropped grenades down the entrances, she crawled toward the sound, timing the explosions, marking which tunnels to seal and which to dig anew. It was survival through instinct, not luck. And Tuyet's instincts were legendary. During one raid, an American platoon discovered an entrance disguised beneath a termite mound. They dropped explosives inside and waited. The ground shook. Dust and smoke burst from the hole. They thought they'd destroyed it, but minutes later the earth behind them moved. And Tuyet emerged silently from another opening just 20 meters away. She didn't fire a shot. She simply observed, watched their movement, counted their numbers, then vanished again as though the earth itself had swallowed her. Later that night, when the Americans set up camp, they began to hear faint sounds from beneath, a scratching, a whisper, a voice that seemed to echo from the soil. Then silence. Moments later, one of their supply crates exploded. Tuyet had planted small charges using salvaged fuses and gunpowder from unexploded shells. Her goal was not to kill, but to haunt, to remind them that even the ground they stood on was alive and watching. One captured U.S. soldier later wrote in his diary, "They call her the ghost. I never saw her. None of us did. But we could feel her. It was like the jungle had eyes and the dirt could breathe." Tuyet's legend spread beyond Kuchich. Commanders from other regions came to study her tunnel defenses, her traps, her false passages, her ability to use silence as a weapon. She once said to a new recruit, "A gun can miss, a word can be heard, but silence never fails." Inside the tunnels, Tuyet became more than a fighter. She was a teacher, a medic, a builder. She helped design the 3-level tunnels, shallow, middle, and deep. The upper tunnels were decoys. The real headquarters were buried deep, sometimes more than 10 meters below. If the Americans flooded one layer, Tuyet and her comrades could seal it off and survive below. To them, the tunnels were not graves, they were wombs, the place where Vietnam itself was reborn. But every legend has a cost. Tuyet's best friend Lan died during an air raid that collapsed part of the system near Tan Phu Trung. Tuyet dug for hours through the rubble, her fingers raw and broken, calling her friend's name in the darkness. When she finally reached her, it was too late. Lan was gone, buried beneath the same earth they had trusted. After that night, Tuyet changed. She spoke less. She moved quieter. She smiled, but it was a hollow smile. Those who served with her said she had truly become a ghost, not just to the Americans, but to her own people. And yet, she fought harder than ever. One day, an American patrol discovered a hidden entrance disguised as a foxhole. They poured gasoline into it and set it on fire. But Tuyet was already beneath their feet, listening, waiting. When the flames burned out, she triggered a small bamboo trap that sealed the passage and trapped them in confusion. Her team then emerged from another tunnel behind them, attacking swiftly before disappearing once more. It was a perfect ambush, planned by Tuyet herself. Later, in the safety of the underground command post, her superior told her, "You move like a shadow, Tuyet. You fight without sound." She simply replied, "Shadows are born from light. They can't exist without it." It was the last time anyone heard her speak that night. As months passed, Tuyet's reputation reached near mythic levels. American soldiers told each other stories around campfires about a woman who could walk through the walls of dirt, whose eyes glowed in the dark, whose whisper could make a man lose his mind. To the Vietnamese, she became a protector spirit, the embodiment of the land's endurance. To the enemy, she was fear itself. By late 1967, the tunnels were under constant siege. New tunnel rat units, small, fearless American soldiers trained to crawl into the darkness, were sent to hunt Tuyet and her comrades. It became a deadly game of silence and breath. Each step, each inhale could be your last. And Tuyet, she always moved one step ahead. She left misleading paths, air vents disguised as roots, and chambers rigged with bamboo spikes. But the most terrifying thing was her calm. She never panicked. Even when cornered, Tuyet's breathing remained steady. To her, fear was a tool, one she learned to control and to weaponize. That's when her people began calling her by a new name, Bong Ma Jat, the shadow of the earth. By 1968, the war above the earth was chaos. Helicopters screaming through the skies, artillery shaking the jungles, villages burned to ash. But beneath it all, an invisible war raged, silent, suffocating, and relentless. It was a war of inches, a war of breaths. And down there, Tuyet ruled. The Americans had adapted. They began sending in tunnel rats, Small, wiry soldiers armed with pistols, knives, and flashlights, trained to hunt the invisible enemy underground. They crawled into the tunnels, one by one, unaware that every inch of soil held Tuyet's memory. To them, the tunnels were a labyrinth of horror. To Tuyet, they were home. In the pitch-black corridors, sound was everything. A single cough could betray you. The scrape of a boot on clay could mean death. Tuyet learned to listen, not just to footsteps, but to heartbeats. She could tell if someone was nervous by the rhythm of air in the tunnels. If she heard hesitation, she knew the intruder was lost. That was when she struck. There are accounts, whispered, never proven, of American soldiers who vanished inside Ngo Thi. Some were found days later, wandering the jungle, eyes wide with terror, unable to speak. Others were never found at all. The jungle had swallowed them whole. On one such night, Tuyet led a small team through a flooded tunnel to sabotage a U.S. ammunition depot near Bendwalk. The air was thick with humidity, the tunnel half filled with muddy water. Each movement was slow, deliberate, silent. Above them, trucks rumbled, heavy with explosives. Tuyet placed a single charge beneath the depot floor, a handmade device built from scavenged American fuses. When it detonated hours later, the explosion shook the earth like thunder. From above, all anyone saw was fire erupting from the jungle. From below, Tuyet simply whispered, "The earth speaks." It was more than destruction. It was a message. Every bomb dropped, every tunnel destroyed, was rebuilt by morning. Every soldier lost was replaced by 2 more volunteers. The Americans realized they weren't fighting an army anymore. They were fighting the land itself, and the land refused to die. As Tuyet's legend spread, so did the Americans' obsession with capturing her. They called her the Ghost Woman of Ngo Thi. Some said she was a myth. Others claimed she could move through walls, disappear into the dirt, or breathe without air. But the truth was simpler. Tuyet was just human. A woman forged by fear, loss, and unbreakable resolve. One American unit, the 25th Infantry Division, set a trap for her. They found a ventilation hole disguised as a termite mound and surrounded it with explosives. They waited for movement, but Tuyet was already beneath them. She had built a secondary passage that led directly below their position. As they stood above, peering into the darkness, she lit a small fuse and whispered, "This land belongs to those who know its breath." The explosion engulfed the clearing in fire. The ground opened like a wound, and when the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but silence. Still, Tuyet wasn't invincible. Every victory came with a price. Supplies grew scarce. The air in the tunnels was poisoned with smoke. Many of her comrades died of suffocation before ever seeing the light again. Tuyet's hands trembled now. Her lungs burned when she breathed, but she refused to stop. As she told her commander, "We cannot fear death when death already lives beside us." Then came the Tet Offensive, 1968, the largest operation Vietnam had ever launched. For months, Tuyet and her network of tunnel fighters prepared silently. They built traps, moved weapons, and coordinated with guerrilla units across Ngo Thi. When the offensive began, the entire ground shook with fury. Explosions lit up the jungle like lightning. Tuyet led her team through collapsing passages, guiding them by touch and instinct alone. At one point, a direct hit sealed the tunnel behind her. Trapped with 3 young recruits, she used her bare hands to dig through the dirt. Hours passed, the air thinned, her vision blurred, but she never stopped digging. When the recruits began to panic, Tuyet took their hands and whispered, "If you can still breathe, then you can still fight." They made it out just before dawn, covered in mud, half conscious but alive. That night, Tuyet emerged from the tunnel to a sight she would never forget. The Koochai jungle was burning. Red skies, smoke rising like ghosts. American flares turned the darkness into a false daylight. She looked around at the devastation, at the trees she grew up under, now turned to ash, and she smiled, a tired, sorrowful smile. "Even fire," she said softly, "can not kill the earth." Her words would later be repeated by survivors across the region. After Tet, Tuyet was wounded during a close-quarters skirmish underground. A tunnel rat had managed to crawl within a few meters of her position. They stared at each other, two people in total darkness, two sides of the same nightmare. He raised his pistol, she raised her knife. Then the tunnel collapsed between them. Both were buried alive. Tuyet clawed her way out after 2 days. The American soldier never surfaced. When her comrades found her, Tuyet's first words were, "We're not ghosts because we died. We're ghosts because we keep coming back." By 1969, Tuyet's body was failing her, but her mind was sharper than ever. She trained new generations of fighters, young women, teenagers, even children, in how to survive, how to build, how to hide. She told them, if they can't see you, they can't kill you, but if they fear you, you've already won. That was Tuyet's gift to her people, not vengeance, but endurance, not the power to destroy, but the power to outlast. In a war where machines ruled the skies, she ruled the soil. The Americans called her a ghost. The Vietnamese called her a guardian. And deep beneath the burning jungle, Tuyet still listened to the earth, to the breath of her fallen friends, and to the promise that the land would never forget them. By 1970, stories of Ngo Thi Tuyet had crossed beyond Cu Chi. American soldiers whispered in hushed tones around campfires about a woman who vanished into the earth only to strike when least expected. They called her the Ghost Woman, a phantom that haunted the tunnels, appearing and disappearing at will. But to the people of Cu Chi, she was something far more sacred. She was a protector, a mother figure to fighters, a guide to the lost, a beacon in total darkness. Even the youngest recruits knew her as the one who could crawl through the tightest passages, repair collapsed tunnels, and orchestrate ambushes with precision that seemed impossible for a single human being. Tuyet's strategies had become masterpieces of guerrilla warfare. She set traps that were more than just physical dangers, bamboo spikes, hidden pits, and explosives. She designed psychological traps. She would place fake footprints leading to dead ends, scatter rations in decoy tunnels, and leave subtle signs that misled the enemy. American soldiers entering Cu Chi never knew which shadow was real and which was her. One account tells of a group of U.S. tunnel rats who entered what they thought was an abandoned shaft. They moved cautiously, flashlights piercing the blackness. A soft sound, a scraping of clay against a wall, froze them. Then the lights flickered. A faint whisper came from nowhere. They fled, convinced the tunnel itself was alive, that a ghost had seen them. And in a way, they were right. Tuyet became more than a soldier. She became the embodiment of Cu Chi itself. She understood the earth, the air, the very vibrations of the soil. She knew where every tunnel bent, where every chamber could hide a squad, and where an ambush could turn the tide of battle. Even her own team began to speak of her in reverent tones. When she is in the tunnels, nothing can touch us. She is not human, she is the Earth's shadow. Despite her growing legend, Tuyet remained humble. She never sought recognition, medals, titles, parades. They meant nothing to her. Her mission was simple: survive, protect, and resist. The lives of her people mattered more than glory. And every night when she returned to her hidden chambers, she would whisper prayers to those who had fallen. The Americans, frustrated by repeated failures, intensified their operations. Flamethrowers, bulldozers, and explosive charges were deployed. Yet Tuyet adapted. She taught her comrades to move silently, to collapse decoy tunnels, to create hidden air vents, and even to escape through underground rivers. No strategy from above could match her intimate knowledge of the land. Her name traveled across the jungle. Villagers spoke of the ghost woman who saved children during air raids. Comrades told tales of her walking through collapsing tunnels, carrying wounded soldiers, leading ambushes, and appearing where she was least expected. American soldiers' reports began describing her in near mythical terms: a shadow that moved faster than sight, a presence that was felt rather than seen. Yet Tuyet was not invincible. She faced moments of extreme fear, air raids that flattened entire sections of tunnels, the constant threat of betrayal, and the grief of seeing comrades die in her arms. Each loss hardened her resolve but left a scar on her heart. She carried the weight of lives and the knowledge that each mission could be her last. During the peak of her legend, Tuyet once infiltrated a heavily fortified American base, carrying explosives disguised as food supplies. The night was dark, the moon hidden by clouds. She moved silently as if walking on air. No dogs barked, no soldiers noticed. By morning, several armored vehicles had been destroyed. No one saw her leave. No one ever would. From that moment on, the Ngo Thi tunnels were no longer just a military network. They were a haunted labyrinth. American troops entered with fear, knowing that at any moment a shadow could strike, a trap could spring, or the ghost woman could appear from the earth itself. To her own people, Tuyet remained a woman of flesh and blood. She laughed quietly with her comrades, healed the wounded, and continued to train new recruits. Yet when the Americans spoke of her, they spoke in whispers, in fear and in awe. She was no longer just a soldier. She was a symbol, a warning, a living legend. By 1971, Ngo Thi Tuyet had become something larger than life. The ghost woman of Ngo Thi was no longer a single fighter. She was the spirit of resistance, the echo of the earth, the shadow that reminded everyone, enemy and ally alike, that courage is forged in darkness. And as long as she moved beneath the soil, the tunnels, and the people she protected would endure. Though the war finally ended in 1975, the jungles of Ngo Thi were silent save for the whispering wind through bamboo and the slow, steady pulse of the earth. Ngo Thi Tuyet emerged from the tunnels not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a survivor. She was 31 years old. Her body carried the scars of the underground, lungs blackened from smoke, hands calloused and bleeding from decades of digging, shoulders stooped from carrying the wounded. Yet her eyes still burned with the same quiet fire that had guided her through the darkest passages of the war. The people of Ngo Thi greeted her with reverence. They had survived because of her courage. They had learned from her, healed by her hands, and fought with her leadership. For them, Tuyet was no longer a legend whispered in fear. She was a guardian, a mother, and a symbol of resilience. But Tuyet did not seek fame. She refused public accolades and medals. Instead, she chose silence. She returned to the land that had raised her, planting trees where bomb craters had scarred the earth, teaching children to respect the soil, and guiding younger generations in the art of survival. Yet her story was never forgotten. American veterans who had faced the tunnels spoke of her in hushed tones. Some admitted they never fully understood how a single woman could command the labyrinth, evade detection, and orchestrate ambushes with deadly precision. She had become immortal in their minds, not because of her body, but because of her presence, her strategy, and the fear she inspired. Her own comrades remembered her as tireless, compassionate, and unwavering. She never abandoned a wounded soldier, never left a trap unexplained, and never allowed fear to cloud her judgment. Through her actions, Tuyet taught them that courage was not measured in medals or victory, but in endurance, in continuing the fight when hope seemed lost. As the years passed, the tunnels of Kucha became a symbol for the world of resilience, ingenuity, and determination. Guided tours would later take visitors through the labyrinth Tuyet had once walked, and as tourists crouched beneath the earth, they were told the story of a woman who became a ghost, a shadow, and a legend. They were told that her courage had shaped the fate of a people, that her mind had outwitted a technologically superior force, and that the earth itself had become her ally. Tuyet herself rarely spoke of the war. When asked how she had survived, how she had endured, she would simply smile and say, "The earth is patient. It teaches those who listen, and if you listen, you will never be alone." Even in silence, her presence remained palpable. The villagers felt her watchful eyes in the tunnels. Her strategies continued to guide resistance movements. Her courage inspired women and men alike to believe that no challenge was too great, no enemy too strong, and no darkness too deep. Ngo Thi Tuyet passed into her later years quietly, but her legacy endures. She is remembered not for medals or fame, but for the lives she saved, the lessons she taught, and the myth she became. The ghost woman of Cu Chi lives on, not just in stories, but in the spirit of every person who walks the land she protected, in every tunnel, every whisper of the bamboo, and in the unbroken heart of Vietnam itself. They called her the ghost woman, a shadow, a myth. But Ngo Thi Tuyet was more than a legend. She was courage made flesh, resilience made living. She was proof that even in the darkest tunnels, light survives, quietly, patiently, and eternally. And as long as the earth remembers, so will we.